topic of the webinar today is the use of Real Trichoderma in citrus black spot and Botrytis disease management. Now, we've got limited time, so I'm going to run through a couple of things quickly. So the contents that we're going to address, it might not be in specific topics like that, but these are the aspects we're going to address in the presentation today is what is IPM? Many of you know, but we will just address that. Second one is what is Real Trichoderma and why are we talking about it? We will discuss the disease triangle and implications briefly. We'll also be discussing specifically this citrus black spot and Botrytis life cycles in citrus orchards. It's going to be a brief discussion. We're not going to elaborate on all the factors. We're going to focus on the factors that specifically apply to the use of trichoderma and how we target those. And that's why we're going to talk about Real Trichoderma application, some of those aspects, and then also Real Trichoderma as part of an IPM program. So any questions that relate to this, any urgent questions, there might be time for one question at the end, but please send those questions in. And then all the people on this presentation, you have Real IPM representatives in your area or people you know that you can contact, and please feel free to send those questions to anyone in your contact list. They will circulate with us and we will get to them. So what is integrated pest management? There are lots of definitions. And for today, I chose one that comes from the US Environmental Protection Agency. And for the specific reason that I find it quite encompassing and it addresses a couple of other things as well. So integrated pest management is an effective and environmentally sensitive approach to pest management that relies on a combination of common sense practices. So IPM programs use current comprehensive information on the life cycles of pests and their interaction with the environment. This information, in combination with available pest control methods, is used to manage pest damage by the most economical means and with the least possible hazard to people, property, and the environment. And that is, to a large degree, what Real IPM's philosophy is in terms of our approach to integrated pest management. So what is Real Trichoderma? Many of you would have worked with trichoderma before. And Real Trichoderma, specifically this one, is Trichoderma asperellum strain TRC900. It was isolated in Kenya, and it's been commercialized and used for the past 20 years plus. The interesting thing about this specific strain of Trichoderma is that it forms an endophytic association with the plant, and you will see that clearly on the hyphae that's associated with this root. It stimulates root growth due to that effect, that it's got an endophytic association and beneficial association. It activates the plant's immune system responses. It's a highly effective mycoparasite of various plant pathogenic fungi, and this is where we're getting to the pest control components, specific targeted pest control components. And in that sense, it's registered against Botrytis and downy mildew on a wide range of crops, and then specifically citrus black spot on citrus, apple scab on pome fruit, and also a recent registration on Fusarium wilt on banana. Right, so when we get to the disease triangle, this is the cornerstone of plant pathology and the understanding of how plants are attacked and how that disease cycle functions. So if we look at disease development, it's part of this triangle. Firstly, we've got the host. So the host is the plant you are growing. It's the plant whose produce you are selling, or the components of the plant that you are selling and making money from. And there are very specific conditions favoring susceptibility for infection in the host. And that's where we can address things. Then there's the pathogen. The pathogen has certain aspects to it, virulence, abundance, etc., and a whole range of factors that determine what the pest is imposing, basically, in terms of its own conditions. And then there's the environment and a range of conditions in the environment, either favoring disease or suppressing disease. There's a whole field of study in terms of suppression and conducive factors to diseases and so on. We won't have time to focus on that today. We're going to focus on specifically the two diseases that I mentioned to you, that I discussed initially. being citrus black spot. So bearing in mind the pest triangle, that we've got the host, we've got the pathogen, we've got the environment. If we look at citrus black spot, you are dealing with these, and I think everyone knows about it, these little black spots on the fruit, which is the main bone of contention for export to Europe and so on. And this is a blemish, and there's a lot of debate. I'm not going to enter into the debate as to how big an issue or risk it is to Europe and so on. What we are going to focus on is that we have a specific phase of the citrus black spot or Phyllosticta citricarpa in the soil and in the leaf litter. And this is where a big component of the current disease management is being looked at, either removing the leaf litter and so on. And I'm going to present a slightly different approach or an alternative to that, which works quite effectively. So what you need to see out of this process is whether the citrus black spot develops on the fruit or whether it's on the plant litter, leaf litter in the soil. What we end up flying around most of these orchards and so on with the weather conditions and the wind is ascospores. And these ascospores are the main ones that come from, this is the main infection route from infected leaf litter on the soil and in the plant itself. Right, so we target that. So just to show you what has been done with Trichoderma asperellum TRC900, which is Real Trichoderma, was an extensive trial conducted in the Letsitele area, ran over 5 years, basically 4 growing seasons. And what you will see is in that there were 2 orchards, or orchards right next to each other. The one was used in a sense, as a control, where there was a CBS protocol spray as per the requirements that was applied. And then another one was used as a treatment where the CBS protocol spray was applied, the same as in the other one. The only difference being that there was Trichoderma asperellum or Real Trichoderma applied through the irrigation once a month at a rate of 200 mils per hectare. And what we see over the 4 seasons is I've taken the spore data, so there were spore traps in each, and the ascospores that were released from the soil and that were traveling and caught up by the spore traps were counted by an independent service provider. And you will see that over the seasons, there's a significant difference in terms of the cumulative spore count. And this relates, as you will see there, it relates to rainfall aspects in the season, temperature, and so on. So there's variation between the seasons, but the interesting thing is that every time that trichoderma was applied, where trichoderma was applied to the soil, there was a very significant, and in this case, the statistics show us a significance level at 0.001, p-value of that, in terms of lower spore generation or spore release. So even in seasons where the initial release was higher, over time, the spore release from the trichoderma treated plot was significantly lower. In some of these was almost non-existent compared to what the control treatment was, which did not include trichoderma. So no difference between those except for the trichoderma. And this is the effect that the trichoderma yielded for us. Right, so why and how do we go about applying trichoderma, Real Trichoderma in this case? So our first focus would be soil applications, and it would be preferable through the irrigation. So if you've got micro irrigation, etc. But if we have drip irrigation, then we don't get the same spread of the trichoderma on the soil. And in those cases, we will advise focused sprays and so on. And that is the type of thing that you will have to discuss with the representative that will service you in terms of this product. So there might be aspects that differ. And a good example, for instance, is in conventional agriculture, where we deal with whether you use herbicides or not, but you've got plant material there, or whether you're in a regenerative setting where your philosophy is different, but your produce is still the same, and so on. So there might be slight differences and slight different approaches to how we will deal with putting the trichoderma down. The bottom line is that the trichoderma has to go in during your high-risk periods, and before that, at least once a month at the label rate as it was registered. And then there are also alternatives. So, sorry, this soil application is a very distinct alternative to removal of leaf litter, and the data speaks for itself. There's also foliar sprays, and it's registered as a foliar spray. And those are the types of sprays that can be incorporated, whether the same or in timing-wise, etc. Decisions be made as to when it's to be applied as foliar sprays. Just take note that we are not, at this stage, saying that it will replace the protocol sprays. So your protocol sprays will still remain in place. What you need to do is, if you're going to combine those or spray at those times, is just check with the compatibility regarding the chemicals you're spraying, and speak to your specific Real IPM representative to guide you in that process. So we can provide a lot of guidance there. Right, when we get to botrytis, so this is a disease that infects many plants and many phases, many components of plants. It's also a disease with major financial repercussions. And if we look at the crops that can be infected and the various pathways, this I think is well known by many, that you will see what botrytis does. The essence of this process is that during your low pest pressure times, there's mycelium and sclerotia that overwinter in the soil or in plant debris. And this is a big component of that we address with the Trichoderma program. Right, so what does botrytis look like? I think the most visual symptoms are probably on lemons, and you will see that lemons often have these ribs and these effects on them. There might be secondary effects of other pests and so on. So what we see there is that it is often, in some places, doesn't always happen like that, associated with things such as the citrus flower moth. So the citrus flower moth lays its egg on that little bulb. As soon as the flower starts forming the little bulb, then what happens after that, we don't get petal drop. And once you don't get petal drop, then you have chances for this little worm to start eating away and cause its own damage here, and then also have all these webs and so on around. But you will see that this is the ideal conditions for botrytis development, and to serve as a proper inoculum for botrytis around fruit that have not been impacted by the citrus moth. And then what you find is, in that development of this fruit, it's constantly exposed to botrytis, and you start getting these blemishes and economical impacts, and impacts on your packouts. Right, so in cases where we don't have citrus flower moth, and where the temperatures and the conditions might not be as favorable for these conditions, we do see fruit loss and fruit drop in some of the cases. This is especially in the northern parts of the country. Right, so just to look at botrytis in highly susceptible crops, where we all know, I'm going to use an example of grapes specifically, but there are lots of other examples. The reason why I use the grape example, because all of you know what a botrytis grape can yield, and that's lovely, lovely late harvest type wine. And if that's not what you want, then obviously you can use Trichoderma to suppress and to control the botrytis. These are the trials that were conducted specifically on grapes, and you'll see that Trichoderma at its label rate application is not significantly different to the chemical control. Just bear in mind that we are losing these chemicals as we go. Some of these chemicals have been removed already. Some of them are out soon. So Trichoderma is a very suitable replacement of those chemicals in those programs. So another part of the botrytis management, again, Trichoderma soil applications. We break the cycle, the spore generation, and the spore inoculum in the soil by having once a month soil applications of Trichoderma at 200 mils per hectare, especially in high pressure times. And the interesting thing about Trichoderma in this case is that, especially where you've got this type of inoculum from effects of citrus flower moth, specifically at times that the weather is also conducive to botrytis development, just remember that those conditions are also highly conducive to trichoderma activity. And therefore, we get very good control under these conditions if your spray timing is correct and your spray intervals are correct. And the process happening there is mycoparasitism. It is literally trichoderma eating, consuming the Botrytis hyphae and spores. Okay. I have to include this. We are also looking at bee vectoring, and there's been a lot of bee vectoring trials regarding botrytis, specifically on strawberries and so on. And the reason why I've got this is, remember, we are dealing with integrated pest management, as I said at the beginning. So in integrated pest management, unfortunately, beneficials are also part of the ecosystem. So we have the odd casualties in the system as well. But this indicates a very healthy ecosystem, even though our beneficials are also being targeted. Right, so to get back to the disease triangle and IPM and real trichoderma, how does this fit in? So in terms of trichoderma, specifically aspects of specific pathogens, and that being citrus black spot and botrytis included, trichoderma is a mycoparasite of those fungi. So by establishing the trichoderma in the system and having a good inoculum of the trichoderma, there's very distinct mycoparasitism that happens. And then also specifically in that environment, competition. And regarding the host, the effect of the trichoderma on the host is an immune system response, which contributes to this pest control strategy, and then also growth and vigor. So all those components work together to give you a suppression of those diseases in those specific systems. Okay, so to conclude, real trichoderma is registered and it is effective as a soil and foliar application on citrus black spot and botrytis. It's important to note and remember that both of these pests have very distinct soil plant detritus survival phases, and this is a core component of the real trichoderma application program. It's also an integral part of integrated pest management strategies. It is compatible with many remedies, some not. So you've got to confirm with your real IPM representative when you embark on a program, and they can help you in guiding you in terms of strategies of application and tank mixing and so on. And the trichoderma has beneficial effects that transcend fungal pathogen suppression and control, and that being improved root development, improved crop production and yield and quality, and improved plant immune system responses. So, bottom line, apply trichoderma today to experience the benefit of a real IPM strategy. Thank you very much. So, if there are any pressing questions, I will have to take the cue from our administrator on this, but for any other questions, anything that you need to find out and want to work with, contact Real IPM on the website or contact the Real IPM representative in your area, or alternatively send me an email at jvdwaals@realipm.co.za, and we'll answer those questions as well as we can. Thank you very much.